Hello everyone, I'm Al from Valentyn.co and welcome to Battlefield 1 Open Beta. Now, the only reason I'm even here, even though I don't play a lot of FPS games online, is because I keep getting asked. There's a certain someone, and you know who you are, that keeps messaging me on YouTube asking for videos on the Fury X and Battlefield 1. And I've also gotten some other messages about that. So here you are. This is going to be the video about the performance and general gameplay. Now, if you played Battlefield games, it's essentially the same except in World War I setting. But performance-wise, it's quite interesting. And, well, it pushes the Fury X to its poor little limits. So let's go through the settings, shall we? Now, for the recording, I am recording in DirectX 11. Unfortunately, it doesn't record in DirectX 12. Very few games do, unless you have an external capture system and card. I don't have that. So as you can see, I'm running at 1440p at 144 FPS. These are just my general settings. I have motion blur on at 50%, which is okay. But if we go to advanced, you can see I've got my resolution scale set to 42%. That is actually the native resolution, that is 1440p. If you increase this, it will increase your resolution scale. Everything else is set to ultra and maxed. I actually played around with that, and the difference between this and auto is nothing. As soon as I load up the game, it automatically set everything maxed out, which was nice. Now my UI scale factor is 50%, I think that's okay. And I have DirectX 12 off, as I said, for this recording. It refuses to record in DirectX 12, it just crashes the game instantly, saying my graphics card doesn't exist, and I should get a graphics card. But that's a common issue with DirectX 12, it doesn't like overlays very much. Now, general performance wise, the game is actually pretty decent. I expected a bit more, but I did find out probably why. It seems the Fury X is memory limited, and it was bound to happen eventually in games at ultra settings. It already happens in Deus Ex, where the memory just runs out and it starts capping the performance. You can't run at very high settings ultra in that game. In Battlefield, however, it's actually quite decent, and let's just put up some of the scores I've gotten. Now, all of these scores that you'll be seeing now were after about an hour's of play, and I was recording and looking for the minimums, max, and then getting the averages, what I could see. And I also checked out the memory usage for dedicated VRAM and dynamic VRAM. Dynamic VRAM is actually very important, especially for Fury X, where it is kind of limited to 4 gigs of HBM. It's got a lot of bandwidth, but it just ain't good enough. So folks, here's some general gameplay in the back with the performance numbers so far, and we'll start off with the Fury X 1440p Ultra, and you can check it here for the FPS. In DirectX 11, it's got a pretty decent showing. It's not too bad with everything maxed out. Now, my biggest concern is the minimums. You can see they're in the 50s. I've got them in the red bar there. 50, it's within my FreeSync range of 30 to 144, but it's not ideal. You can see the average is 64, but the max is 90. So it's quite a substantial jumping around, and it is noticeable when things get really intense. It's not ideal, but as soon as I switch to DirectX 12 without any differences in the settings, you can see my minimums jumped up to 61. That is the sweet spot. So DirectX 12 is doing what it's supposed to do. As far as I know, it's not a finished DirectX 12 version. It does have some issues according to some people. If you have a not a Fury X, if you have an RX 480, you might actually notice some of the performance decreases according to some other reviewers like Joker. But as you can see here, my minimums jumped up significantly. 11 FPS on average. I never saw a dip below the 60s at all. It never went to the 50s once. Even my averages are much better, 71. So in, like, I think the sweet spot for an FPS. Of course, if you've got like a Titan or 1080 graphics card, you'll be running much higher. You also won't be VRAM capped in some instances. But the interesting thing is my max FPS did drop down in DirectX 12. Now this is very similar to Rise of the Tomb Raider, where a Fury card in DirectX 11 will have really low minimum FPS sometimes. It dips quite a bit low, causes a lot of stutter. But as soon as you activate DirectX 12, it ups the FPS for the minimums, which overall results in a much smoother gameplay experience. So if you have a Fury card or anything with HBM from AMD, the Nano, the Fury, or the Fury X, I really suggest DirectX 12. Even though your max is a bit lower, no one cares about max. You want to look at the minimums, I think personally, because that'll give you the average and worst case best performance for you. So if it doesn't dip below 60, you're in the sweet spot right there. But now let's flip it around and look at the memory usage. Now as you can see right here, in DirectX 11 it uses a lot more memory. Now the average to max it recorded for dedicated VRAM was 3,942 megs out of 4,000. Remember, the Fury cards have 4,000 gigabytes. Now it is HBM, it's got a lot of bandwidth. That doesn't really mean anything if your memory capped like that. And I think that is the reason why my minimums were so low at some points. As soon as I got into some heavy action, FPS would just go from the 60s, tank straight down to the 50s, hover there and stay there and fluctuate quite a bit. And you can see the dynamic VRAM is only 665. That's okay, that's how much is being used on the fly instead of being dedicated for textures and everything else. So it's not a great amount. It is better than Deus Ex Mankind Divided, but it's not great. The problem is that dedicated VRAM, it's a bit too high. But then, once again, when we turn on DirectX 12, we do see improvements. The dedicated VRAM usage has dropped, and it's the same map. And I played a bit longer there on DirectX 12 mode to see if I could actually find dips anywhere else. The VRAM usage for dedicated is lower, but dynamic is up. So it seems to be making a bit better usage of the high bandwidth memory and the actual VRAM that's on the card. So far, DirectX 12 results in a far better experience. It's far smoother. Like, I do have FreeSync on, which does help quite a bit. But with massive frame rate dips that was on DirectX 11, when you're going from 90s to 50s sometimes, all the range in between, it is quite noticing and jarring. With DirectX 12, it seems to just level things out a bit. There's a 20 FPS delta almost between the minimums and max. And I find that sweet spot in the 70s is just right for me personally. So, there you have it. I'm just gonna let it run with some extra, gameplay in the back with these charts here so you can see what it is. Unfortunately, I don't have any other cards at the moment to test it with, but the Fury X at 1440p Ultra settings completely maxed out with TAA, Temporal Anti-Aliasing. It's doing quite well actually. Like, I haven't bothered knocking anything down. I didn't see the point. It automatically auto-detected everything to Ultra. My biggest concern is the VRAM issues. So, in the footage that you're seeing in the back this entire time, remember, this is recorded in DirectX 11. And recording with DX Story at a near lossless footage is going to knock down the FPS. So, the video you see in the back isn't 100% representative of what I see. It knocked off around 15 FPS on average. So, my minimums are even lower while recording. Is quite unfortunate, but I do look forward to AMD's Vega card coming out hopefully end of the year or early next year. That should be a significant improvement hopefully. But overall, my experience with the Fury X in Battlefield 1 beta is quite nice. Performance can only increase, especially with refinements to DirectX 12 version, which is, as far as I know, early. Like I said, if you have an RX 480, you will probably be noticing worse performance activating it, according to some people, but worse performance as in 1 to 2 FPS drops. But that's on averages, and I wouldn't mind an average dipping if my minimums go up. That's the main thing. But well folks, I'll leave it here with the charts for you and some gameplay. And I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Bye bye.
Take it. First aid, use it.
We have taken objective apples.
First aid. Thank you. Appreciate it.
lost objective butter. We have lost objective George. We have taken objective Freddy.
Good news, lads. We've taken the objective.
We are losing objective Charlie.
Enemy attack! Down horseback!
We have lost objective Charlie. We have taken objective Freddy. We have taken objective George.
Our lads have taken the objective!
We have taken objective butter.
Our men have disabled that objective!
We have lost objective butter. We have taken objective George. We have taken objective Duff.
Sylvanas, your quest
for immortality has left